there. This is Leslie Mitchell-Clark and also
Wes Roberts.
That's right. And we are here at the fantastic Cosmic and Disclosure Symposium 2024. And we have one of our fabulous guests with us right here, Mr. Serge Grambois.
Hey, Leslie. Nice to be here.
Thank you, Serge. So, Serge, just tell me a little bit about, the conference and the work that you do as a full trance channeler, and how do you feel this information that Kris imparted today is going to be relevant for the listeners?
I don't have a lot of memory about exactly what he said, but I have the general tone of it, which I felt was uplifting and encourages people to keep exploring, to keep discovering more about their lives and their universe.
And of course, maybe another ultra-terrestrial being, Bashar, has often said that it's essential to follow your passion, to follow your joy. And that is often an indicator that you are on the right path in your life. What do you think about that?
I 100% agree, especially if your passion and joy is chocolate cake.
Do you have a question, Wes?
I was watching Kris and Serge together and talking about dreams, and that this is a collective dream was one of the things that was mentioned. It's like, did we pre-plan this collective dream, or is it by accident or synchronicity?
I would think, from my experiences of channeling for 42 years, that there's a difference between what we think is pre-planned. It may be, but it's got a lot of open-endedness. It's not fate, but it's a lot of possibilities and probabilities that all mix into it, depending on our, I would say, our moods or state of mind, that we can alter our events. We can change what's going on in our lives. And a lot of that has to do with how we think about things, our attitudes and expectations. That's what determines what we're going to experience. So if you don't like what you're experiencing, change your mood, change your attitude, and then let go of the old stuff.
Thank you.
So in a sense, it is a universe of free will, and we decide when and how we're going to move ahead.
I would agree with that as well. The idea of free will is debated in all circles of life, but you have to experience it. And for instance, my family background was extremely dysfunctional. I should be an alcoholic, a drug user, or dead, and I'm none of those things. So I changed my circumstances, but inside. And the result is what's happening outside.
Well, there you have it, folks. This is just a little mini chat with Serge Grambois, full trance channeler of the ultra-dimensional entity Kris. And here we are at the Cosmic Disclosure Symposium, and we'll have more little snippets for you later. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me to this wonderful symposium, the two of you. And thank you for having me here, everyone. I haven't done a speaking engagement like this for a little while, because especially with COVID, you just do it at home on Zoom and stay that way. But this is a outing for me. It's very nice. And I can also empathize with everyone who has been affected in one way or another with COVID and its restrictions. And it's still in some ways going on. I hear from friends who just got COVID in hospital for weeks, so they're still struggling with the issues. And at the same time, they're still very strong people. They're going through it and coming out at the other end stronger than when they went in. So just a very little bit of background on myself. When I was 8 years old, we moved from Montreal to Ottawa. And one morning, I am waiting at the corner for the lights to turn green so I could go to school. And there were a few adults around me, and out of the blue, I suddenly look at them, and a strange set of thoughts crosses my mind, and it says, I wonder what these people think, why do they think the things they do, and why do they do the things they do? And I immediately went, I'm too young for that, sorry. But that planted a seed which still is growing today and bearing fruit. And it led me to want to investigate all sorts of alternative things. When I was about 13, 14 years old, I fell in love with everything that Edgar Cayce wrote. And still to this day, I read a lot. And somewhere around 1982, very early 1982, it was suggested to me that I contact a couple in Picton, Ontario. And because she was a very intuitive individual, so a friend of mine and I drove down there, and they picked up on my interest in channeling and Edgar Cayce, and they suggested that a friend of theirs was having his very first channeling that evening, so if I wanted to come back after dinner, we were welcome to participate. And the fellow's name is, or was, Rick Thurston. He's passed away now. The funny thing is that when he was induced into the trance state, I also went there without realizing. So they picked up on that, and I think a couple of weekends afterwards, they were offering a workshop to develop the ability to do that, which I did. And I practiced every single day for a month, and nothing was happening. And my friend said, well, why don't we try one last time? So we did that, and about 15 minutes into it, I'm hearing another voice. And I'm going, I don't remember somebody else coming into the room. And that snapped me out of it, and I realized that it happened. I got a connection. So we practiced that until I could hold that state for an hour or more. And after about a year and a half of that, I was actually just sitting, and some friends were talking, and I noticed a very familiar sensation of going into a trance, but there was nobody guiding me into the relaxed state. It just happened spontaneously. And of course, my friends noticed it right away, and they took advantage of it. And that led me to think, I think this would be better for me because it's spontaneous. I don't have to lie down. I don't have to go into a deep meditation first. The transition was seamless. So I stayed with that. And sometime later, I started having dreams with a specific personality, which evolved and became what I do now. The process is very quick. I've been doing this since 1982, so it's very quick for me. And the personality that I call Kris, for lack of a better name, I started spelling it K-I-R-S because at some point I spelled it C-H-R-I-S, and somebody says, oh, it sounds so much like Jesus Christ. And I said, you're not going to label me with that. So I changed the spelling. Kris is quite humorous, stacked with wisdom. He also cracks jokes. So be ready for that if he does. It's quite insightful. I have no idea how he's going to approach this because it's not an area that we've delved a lot into. So in a way, it's kind of new for me. And I know from things that have been going on lately, it's not new for him. I have a client in Israel, and she's been asking him about stuff in relation to this, and he gave very interesting answers. So we'll see if some of that will come up today. And we're going to do a little bit of the channeling and also open to a Q&A, which I think would be, and in fact, it's in the Q&A that more the fun side comes out. So everyone feel free to ask questions. Just make sure you speak loud enough. And so I'm kind of getting the buzz to shut up and get out of the way. So I'm going to do that. Now, usually my glasses come off, and the voice is going to be different. The accent's going to be different. And he's described his accent more of as a cosmopolitan type accent. A little bit of this, a little bit of that. So just enjoy it. Cool. No, I'll stay here. I'll be good here.
You don't want the chair?
No, I'll be good here.
Need another microphone? Do you want me to get the people's questions with the other microphone, maybe?
when we get to there, yeah, sure.
Okay,
Yeah,
carry on.
cool. Thank you very much. Thank you for taking care of me. Leslie is awesome. Now we trust that you are comfortable, and we thank you for your consideration, especially our lovely hosts. The topic that is bringing this symposium together is one that has fascinated humankind for far longer than your historians are able to pinpoint. Basically because your species has been around for far longer than you are led to believe. And there have been many upheavals and catastrophes and that have wiped out civilizations over and over, and yet you still find the tenacity to continue exploring your world and your creations. And that is very, very important. And the topic of this symposium, the subject matter, has been a part of your race's history, mostly in the background, for a very long time. And we would say millions of years more than is acknowledged. And there are traces of that in many of the more ancient cultures that have survived cataclysms. One of them, of course, is the Babylonians. Another is the Vedic civilization, the ancient Hindu culture. And their writings are replete with extra-dimensional beings, vehicles that can travel not only all over the world, not only to other planets, but to other dimensions. And there are many, many descriptions of other dimensional travel. And your scientists are just beginning to unravel some of those interesting theories, in quotation marks. So there is such a thing as time dilation that they are uncovering without necessarily realizing that the Hindu writings have spoken about that 3,000-4,000 years ago. And there is an interesting story about a king who wanted to marry his daughter off. And he was uncertain as to whom the best suitor, which would have been a prince, was the most viable. So he and his daughter went to a system called Brahmaloka, the planet of Lord Brahma, who is the creator of the physical universe. And they had an hour's visit with him, and they wanted to go back. And Brahma said, you have to understand something. Your hour here was 10,000 years in your physical world. So everything has changed. And of course, all the potential suitors perished a long time ago. So you will have to start again. So, and there are many, many other similar stories, and there are descriptions of flying machines called Vimanas. Some of you might be familiar with those, at least the descriptions of them. Some could travel into other dimensions, other realms of existence, where other kinds of beings, other life forms existed. The stories were handed down mouth to ear for thousands of years, and eventually were written down. And even in the writing down, many distortions occurred. Many of the writings were lost, destroyed by invaders that occupied India repeatedly in waves. But the material that has survived is enough to give pause to the way you understand the physical world and to lead you into questioning that physical world and to explore other realms of existence. A recent discovery in some of the ancient temples has produced secret writings that push the boundaries of human understanding and existence further and further back in what you call time. But not just at the physical level, but also in the way you understand the psychology of time and space, clearly indicating that your understandings of so-called physical time and space is actually a psychological, emotional phenomenon, and that your whole creation is the result of thought. And that can also break barriers to your understanding not only of yourself, but how you create your world and all of the experiences within it. The philosophies that have fallen out of that have come out of that throughout the ancient world, are also about getting a different understanding of how you form your experience through your emotions and expectations, your attitudes, and so on. There's an important thing to keep in mind, because it will revolutionize your existence. Even the study of quantum science is still in its infancy. And they will come to recognize that quantum science and the quanta originates in your ideas, your individual and collective ideas about your experience and your world. And those aspects of your own self, because you too are multi-dimensional beings, you have become convinced through the auspices of your lovely physical senses that you are this person in this here and now, and you are nothing else. And you are unawares of the multitudes of experiences that you have simultaneous in other worlds and other realms and other dimensions, even in other kinds of times and spaces, but you are not aware of that. And the reason we bring that up is that your experiences with these kinds of phenomena that are the subject matter of this symposium are related. You are exploring unknown or alien selves, those other aspects of yourselves that you're just beginning to understand in terms of science, in terms of neurology, because they know that your mind, as you know it, is just one of many. You are basically like a diamond with multiple facets reflecting your own thoughts in all directions at once. And that is the simultaneous nature of existence. So time, as you have come to understand it, is but one fraction of the simultaneous nature of time and space. And what we have called dream time, which is very similar to the Australian Aboriginal concept, is that even this physical experience is part of your dream life. You're just not aware that you are also dreaming whilst awake. And this happens constantly, consistently throughout all of your experiences. And what you call the collective, whether you call it unconscious or subconscious, again, is a small reflection of a concept that unfortunately, takes time to understand the simultaneous nature of time. So everything occurs in one unique moment where you have your existence in multitudes of realities simultaneously. And we definitely encourage each and every one of you, present and not, to explore who and what you are, well beyond any ideas of what you think you are, that you are more than just your physical form here and now sitting in this room. You have other forms active in other dimensions. Some of you may call them reincarnational lives, but it goes well beyond that. And greater understanding and greater discoveries will eventually change the whole nature of what you understand in terms of physics and metaphysics. You are on the cutting edge. You have, say, a leg up on it. You have an advantage. You are exploring topics that the general population would just roll its eyes at. And we are certain many of you have experienced that. When you bring up this subject matter and your friend's eyes just roll in the back of their head. And yet you are steadfast in your exploration. And it certainly helps to have a sense of humor. Even though other people may roll their eyes at you, you know that you are onto something because it is basically making them uncomfortable, but in a good way. It pushes their buttons. It helps them seek the edges of their own reality. Some may find it best to just retreat, and others may eventually think because you have sown seeds. And sowing seeds is the most important thing that you can do. It makes other people think. And that is important at all levels. Because when you become a sheep, you stop thinking. You tell yourself then that other people know best for what is good for you. And that more or less ends up killing your spirit, your creativity, your collaborativeness. So always keep pushing those envelopes. Always keep going beyond the limits that have been imposed upon you, just by the collective. And seek answers always. Otherwise, how are you going to get any kind of information? So perhaps this might be a good time just to open the floor to inquiries. We noticed you were writing things down, most likely leading up to questions. What do you think?
I think that's perfect.
Indeed. Then feel free to proceed.
Does anyone have a question? Yes? No? You have a question? Okay.
Speak loudly.
Hi, Kris. It was a pleasure to hear you speak. I want to ask you about an entity or an Anunnaki god. His name is Ea or Enki. I want you to, if you know him, was he beneficial to the human race or was he malevolent to the human race?
You are speaking of Enki, the Anu. Yes. This is an interesting phenomenon that, of course, has been distorted over time. That ancient culture, what you refer to as the Anunnaki, the Anu, were not so much manipulators and splicers of genes and so on and so forth. From our perspective, they were teachers. Teachers that exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. They just took that form to help the population at the time, not specifically with genetic engineering, but mental engineering. Helping those individuals expand their mental boundaries, see the world in a different light, to tap into their potential so that they could create opportunities to change their world which is a very big difference. And they were not the only teachers. The Siddhar, the sadhus, the saints of almost every culture that left teachings behind were similar teachers. Each group of teacher and each teacher adapts the material to the locality and to the population in those specific times. The information stays steadfast, but it can be changed according to time and circumstance. And that is very important, because if there is a population that is at a particular stage of development, you must adapt. You follow that? So all of these teachers, and there have been many, and there have been cultures and civilizations that have been wiped off the face of your planet, so it seems, that have continued in other realms. Many of the cultures and civilizations, even in your world, may also have morphed into something else, another kind of culture. But when there is, how do we say, when a particular culture has reached its peak within a specific environment, then they need to create a new environment to break their own collective glass ceilings. And they may simply transfer, if you like. They would appear to be wiped off in this world and appear in another that can present greater opportunities. And that is the beauty of the simultaneous nature of time and space, especially through the auspices of dream time. Because as we suggested earlier, this is a collective dream right now. Your entire physical world is a dream experience. So they simply, in so many words, create a new type of dream environment where they will explore further the potential available to them to literally bend time, space, and thought form into new creations. Does that make sense to you?
Thank you very much.
Indeed.
Any other questions? Oh, I think this lady over here. You're first, your second, your third.
Thank you so much for taking my question. I do have a lot of questions I don't have words for, but what can you tell me about lucid dreaming? Lucid dreaming where I can change my thoughts and I'm somewhere else and it's kind of red.
So lucid dreaming is an interesting phenomenon, a direct offshoot of dream time experience. So you simply become aware of yourself in a different kind of environment. Your physical form is still more or less resting on the bed, but you are active elsewhere. You are performing things that may even defy the laws of physics, as you call them in your world. If you can do that in dreams, it means that your so-called laws of physics themselves are quite limited, and the understanding is quite limited. If you can do that in dream time, whether you call it an astral projection or so on, you are actively changing the form of your reality at that particular level of experience. So more practice will let you see that initially all the experiences in that circumstance are the projections of your mind. Knowing that, you can transform the projections and influence your physical life. That is what is so important. That is why this experience has been with your species from the get-go. In fact, you come from, as a species, you come from your own dream experiences, and you created a different kind of dream environment. You call it physical life. That's why we said earlier, even now you're dreaming. You just don't know it. Does that make some sense to you?
It does. It does. Thank you. I've had dreams where I've been flying.
Indeed. There are very interesting stages, and an avid dreamer can begin to take notes. For instance, in some dreams, you might recognize that you're in one room and you need to go to another in a house. You can simply hover several inches over the floor. Or you can walk right through walls, or you can just appear. You can also go to a second stage where you can rise up right through the roof of the house and head off somewhere. Another particular form, if you want to travel into the higher atmosphere of your planet or even into space. So you have different forms or dream bodies available to you. But you are always the director of that ship. You're always the captain. The same with this life. This also applies. In physical life, you often think events and circumstances derail you. It is not the events, circumstances, or physical life. It is the thinking. So exploring self-mastery through some of the old philosophies may greatly assist you. Indeed.
And this lady right here? Well, I have a question, but just on this one. My son was 4 years old. He was eating his Cheerios and said, "You know what, Mommy? I think we're really not real, but we're a dream that's been going on for a very long time. The one thing I do know," he said, "is growing up." And I wrote that down in his story. He's now in his 40s. But that just helped confirm some stuff to me. Thank you very much. The other thing is, I had contact for, well, since before I could talk. And I've had a couple of, the entities I'm having come, like haven't been lately, but I'm 68 now, they just don't seem interested. But it's always, it was a very good experience, not a bad one. But the first set were like praying mantises. But then when I had a medical store up in Bradford for a couple of years, and I kind of got taken into my store one night after a big sound of it. Anyway, it was long. They brought me into my store, and these two men came in. I thought they were Mormons. They had white shirts, black pants, and I don't know who they were. And I asked them, "Why am I here?" And I didn't mean it like on the planet. I meant in my store.
We can assure you they were not Mormons.
No, I said, no, okay, I just said, no tags, no name tags, so they did not identify themselves, but no, they said, no, you're not, I said, they said, yeah, I won't tell you what they said, but too much, but do you have any idea who they could have been? Because
So everyone is connected to, some people say, source. Now, source is an interesting label. You might think it's one thing, but it is a multitude of things. So you might very easily have been approached by different facets of your own source to give you information. What they gave you and what you remembered, what you experienced are two different things. There are always multiple seeds planted, even with one subject matter. So you can mentally return to the event and see what else has unfolded, what else has transpired in that particular experience. And you might see other things that you never saw before. Just like many people have a dream, write it down, think they understand it, and then months or years later, revisit that dream in their writings, and suddenly, a whole list of new interpretations comes up. So in that manner, you may have other issues that can be explored with that connection. Yeah, speak louder. Or come closer.
thank you for being with us and sharing. My question is, the collective humanity today, is it near a glass ceiling?
Repeat the last part.
Is the collective humanity today near a glass ceiling? Is it collective humanity?
Indeed. You are in the throes of a resistance to growth that eventually has to recognize that the only way to continue is to abandon many of the old ways, and that's not just physical ways. mental ways, the mentality, the attitudes, the expectations have to change. In other words, the mindset. This is why we suggested a few times already, mindset or self-mastery is extremely important. Because without that, you are basically led left, right, and center, and up and down and everywhere by your senses and your impulses. An interesting way to begin to check that is to recognize, do you need something or do you want something? Interestingly enough, your present world, especially with commercialism, is very much about keeping you thinking if you want something, it's because you need it, so buy it. So once you can master that, it opens the doors to recognizing other parts of your life that you also might just decide to give up. Perhaps especially mental habits, mental patterns. For instance, it is a very common practice in all across society that you have to expect the worst possible outcome. When is, not if, when is the other shoe going to drop? Because I'm expecting it, and guess what? Your expectations often are rewarded. If you change the nature of your expectation, such as there is no other shoe, I am shoeless, then you can eschew that mentality and give it up. And that would make a significant impact in your quality of life, because that particular habit, it's a terrible mental habit of expecting the worst possible outcome, actually saps the life out of you. It keeps you on the down low. It does not allow you to express your creativity and the very basic nature of joy in life. Does that make sense to you? You're most welcome.
Ladies next, right here.
Now you are.
Hi, thank you. I've got two questions. The first one is, where do you come from?
You may think you come from your parents, and your parents come from their parents, and their parents come from their parents. And that is very nice at that particular level of genetics. But ultimately, you, who are in your body, don't come from there. It would be the same as if you get in a car and say, I'm a car now, because I'm in the car. So you think you are your body. So if you point to your nose, that is your nose, that is your ear, that is your lips. It is not you. Does that make sense so far?
Absolutely.
So you, as all of you, are multidimensional beings. So the number of dimensions is truly limitless because they are the product of your own inner thinking. And you will always think, whether you are in a body or not. The kind of thinking you do when you're out of your body, even if it is only in an out-of-body experience, for example, or through the process of death, you literally open up to a world that has been closed off to you because in order to survive in this plane of existence, you need to rely on your physical senses. But beyond that, there are worlds beyond description. We come from such worlds. We are teachers. We adapt form and material according to the location and the beings we are going to be interacting with. So we can be on a totally different planetary system, and we need to tell you that the beautiful planets that you have all mapped out and that you see through your new telescopes and whatever, it's just a tiny drop in an ocean. So there are multiple worlds within multiple worlds, just like a mirror effect. Mirror within a mirror within a mirror. So there are worlds within worlds, and they all exist simultaneously. So there are versions of you that exist in other environments that you're not aware of, because You have emotionally restrained yourself in order to be functioning in this world. But if you ceased fearing that, we'll just give you a little example. Our friend Joseph here, we refer to him as Joseph, has an innate ability to cook, whether it is for one person or 500. And one day at his work, it was quiet, and he started to think, I wonder where, because he took no cooking lessons, I wonder where it comes from. And immediately a scene opened up in his mind's eye, where he was working in the kitchen of an ancient Roman senator in Rome, with all the pots and pans and all the exotic meats and things that he used to work with. So they gave him an answer. So you can do the same. You have to ask, and then be open to answers or replies, but not just the way you want them. It was very popular maybe 25, 30 years ago for everyone to want to have been someone famous and powerful in Atlantis. Let us sort of drop by the roadside now, because it is not what it's about. You could be a peasant in Atlantis and you would still have benefited, not just because you were rich and powerful. Very often, it's not the rich and powerful that have the most enriching experiences. It could be the peasant mother who has 2 children to feed and how she loves them. Does that make some sense?
Absolutely, and it kind of falls into the next question I had.
Well, sorry, we did not mean to peek over your sheet.
It was, you mentioned, coming at the leading edge, we're pushing the boundaries of exploration, and you said we have to explore. And I interpret that to be not necessarily through, I don't know, physicality, more just going inside, because inside is where I think of the information. That's where everything happens.
Yes. In fact, there is a very interesting little excerpt in one of the Winnie Pooh stories. Winnie the Pooh. Who would have thought it was so deeply metaphysical? But Winnie Pooh says, isn't it interesting how we pay so much attention to the outside, and yet everything happens inside? And that's exactly what happens. So when the mind changes, it becomes more open, more creative, taps into its greater creativity source, then slowly and gradually, the outside circumstances also begin to change and adapt. They reflect. So your entire physical world is a reflection of your emotional states in one form or another. Even that which you think could not possibly, rivers, mountains, and oceans, but they also represent facets of your emotional nature. All of it. So change your inner nature to drop all your limitations, all your fears, all your hesitations, all your self-directed judgments that you're never good enough. Nobody can love you. I cannot love, blah, blah, blah. Drop that. Know that you are, as they say in Sanskrit, Satchit Ananda Vigraha. You are the embodiment of love and eternal life and joy. Act in that way, and your life will begin to reflect that. This is an extremely simple basis. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. So just approaching, sitting down, closing my eyes, just going within.
Or even just walking outside. And instead of saying, oh, this is a homeless person, oh, this one here, oh, that, drop all of the labels and just love them. Just love them. That produces something interesting. You also recognize that the only way to love them is to love you. There is no other way. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Indeed. Might there be another? Yes? Feel free to speak loud.
When people first begin channeling, whether they do it at a young age or as they're older, how do they know they're not connecting with an entity that's not positive, that maybe
In your world, you have duality. So you label something not positive or negative, and something positive. And yet, if you dropped all the labels, especially the idea that there is some kind of evil force, you only have one choice, yourself. What do you consider yourself to be? A positive, enriching, and lovely individual. That will reflect into your world. We don't necessarily want to open a religious can of worms, because we have some very interesting insights into that. But just say for the time being that if you are a lovely and loving individual, then that is what you get. Does that make sense to you? So honor and cherish that above all things, and you will have a similar experience all through the rest of your life.
Do some channelers, I had TV shows of the unusual, and I had some channelers on, and they had done things in order to protect themselves from
So
negative.
depending upon the, let's say, the open-mindedness of the channeler, you may have different kinds of experiences. So if the channeler still holds on to old ideas that the world is somehow or other dangerous, that you must watch out, at any corner something will get you, that may reflect through the information. Does that make sense?
Very interesting. Thank you.
Indeed, you are most welcome.
Kris, I think we have time for one more question.
Indeed.
Today? Yes, sir.
You talked about quantum science and quantum mechanics, and as well as metaphysics. Are there any authors that come close to how nature really works? Like, is David Bohm, for example, his books, does it reflect how quantum mechanics works?
The idea of quantum mechanics and quantum physics, as it is understood today, again, is just on the cusp of a huge evolutionary leap. The thing that is missing, and this is one of the reasons why so-called alien contact has actually been fairly low, is because you all believe that you are a physical form, and that form creates consciousness. And many other ancient civilizations actually view it the other way around. They view form as the result of consciousness, not consciousness the result of form. So quantum physics, quantum mechanics, and all your sciences will literally be completely transformed once you accept that premise. And it is a very, very significant thing. And that is why we also said, that is why many contacts are not happening. Because they have eschewed, say, they have gone well beyond the idea that consciousness comes from form. They find that quite restrictive. So they communicate in other ways to try and push the boundaries, to try and push you to see that you are not physical. You have a physical expression, but that is not what you are. Does that make some sense to you?
Thank you.
You're most welcome.
Thank you.
And
Kris.
indeed, we thank you all for your lovely physical and non-physical consideration, and may you have a wonderful day.